Good afternoon, everybody. Boa tarde a todos em Portugal e a todas. I'm very pleased to be co-hosting with my good friend Sven Giegold, coordinator for the Greens on the FISC subcommittee in the FISC committee in the European Parliament, and also a founding member of the Tax Justice Network. This debate on taxation in the EU and the expectations regarding the Portuguese presidency of the European Union coming next January. And I'm very pleased that we have today with us here Paul Tang, who is the chair of the FISC committee. The three of us fought for the existence of the FISC committee, and it's great that now it exists, it's working, and that Paul is the chair. And I would start, I'm sure Sven will come up as co-host with his own introductory remarks, but I will now immediately call Paul to tell us what is the added value that you see for the FISC committee as representing the involvement of the Parliament in taxation matters, and what do you expect of the Portuguese presidency? Will the Portuguese presidency make a difference? Can it make a difference? Should it make a difference? Paul, you have the floor.
Most definitely. And let me start with our work on in the European Parliament. Like you said, the three of us together fought for the FISC committee. Committee on Fiscal Affairs in the European Parliament. Why do I think that's important? Because we are well informed, to start with, better informed than most national parliaments, and you need to engage in the debates both in the international, at the European, and at the national level. It is my experience in the last 5 years already that the European Parliament can be an active player just by being on top of it and very well informed. One other example I would like to give, but because for the viewers, I'm from the Netherlands, and Netherlands is one of the tax havens. Now, it has been a fierce debate in the European Parliament and in Europe that on whether we should mention countries, we should single out countries. It's my firm belief as a social democrat that we need to fight that. And I think the European Parliament turned out after the fight we had together that we were able to mention the countries, the tax havens, and it's not just the Netherlands, it's also Luxembourg and Ireland and Malta and Cyprus, but that we are the only European institute that dares to take on this fight. One colleague said to me, said yesterday, we need to make sure that we look into the mirror. And this is exactly what the European Parliament can and should do. Perhaps we'll come back to that. On the presidency of Portugal, I think that there are opportunities, and I think Sven has already wrote an extensive letter on one of the issues, and he's very right in that, and that is on country by country reporting. I've been working on tax avoidance and tax evasion for many years, and I've learned that one of the most potent instruments we have is transparency, because these constructions can see the light of day. And country by country reporting is obliging corporates, the large corporates, to tell where they make profits and where they pay taxes. So this is a crucial element, and that has been stuck in the council with the member states for many years, but there could be a majority if someone brings it up. And I know that Sven has been pushing the German presidency and is now pushing the Portuguese presidency, and he's absolutely right in that. This is where you can make a difference. The second thing I would I expect the European Commission to come up with measures to tackle tax avoidance. That goes in European lingo, that's called Article 116. But the point is that the Commission is, Paolo Gentiloni in the lead, is willing to take up this fight against tax avoidance, of course, backed by the European Parliament. We have been calling this for many years, but I expect this debate to be in the Portuguese presidency, and There we have the same situation as I just had for I just described for the European Parliament. Do we dare to single out member states? Do we dare to look in the mirror? And finally, there will be a discussion on own resources and the digital levy, which will also be and leading towards a possible result in the international negotiations at the OECD in Paris, which could lead to a reform in the corporate tax system, including a minimum effective tax rate, but also a form of a digital tax. Now, and Europe has to have a strong position here. The international negotiations won't be a success unless Europe is united. And there are two pillars, and we need both pillars. So a form of a digital tax, I keep it simple for the viewer, and a minimum effective tax rate. And I think so there is a lot ongoing at this stage, and at a crucial time, because this is the time of COVID. Our societies and our economies are taking a severe hit, and people will wonder who will pay the bill for this. Am I going to pay the bill like last time when the bankers escaped and we got the bill, or is it this time different? And well, it has to be different this time. And I think the Portuguese presidency can play at the right time a crucial role in that.
Thank you, Paul. Now, Sven, as Paul said, you wrote a letter to the Portuguese government with your expectations and pressing for, indeed, movement in the council, and you certainly expect the Portuguese presidency to make a difference in this crucial file for not just for tax justice, but indeed for justice, for social justice, as Paul has said. Now, in the framework of the pandemics, all our states need all the resources they have to put it in the social support of those most vulnerable in our societies. They often complain they don't have money. So yeah, this is a crucial way to get the money and to actually not let it go away into tax havens. So can you, Sven, let us know what were the main points you were making in your letter to the Portuguese presidency, and how indeed do you see this making a difference for indeed enabling progress in taxation so that it meets the objectives of social justice and tax justice?
Well, first, thank you. And I have to say one thing before we start talking taxation. I'm so glad seeing you again. I really miss you in the European Parliament. We have been working so long for these issues, money laundering, chasing the criminals which are misusing globalization in order to do their dirty business, and also for tax justice in Europe. And I really miss you, and I'm really envious because I can't vote for you in Portugal. That's what the Portuguese have to do themselves. So I hope that you will have success with your campaign. And I think as everywhere in Europe, there are lots of open ends. Before I talk about Portugal, I might share a few things on Germany, because it's at the moment Germany holding the presidency. And what we achieved together after the publication of LuxLeaks and the Panama Papers, we changed the majorities first in the European Parliament, where we first had a majority against strong tax cooperation. Now we have a solid majority for stronger rules against money laundering and for tax cooperation. Well, we see that Christian Democrats in particular are more hesitant. We are seeing this now also in the first negotiations in the Fiscal Committee. But however, we are having a majority. We pushed the Commission already, the Juncker Commission, hallelujah, yeah? So Juncker, yeah, to put out proposals which went into the right direction, more than any other Commission president has ever suggested. But now we have the following problem. All of the most important proposals are blocked. So only to list the key ones: the reform of the value-added tax system. It's worth at least 50 billion euros of tax fraud in Europe, blocked in Council. The financial transaction tax, so important, blocked in Council. The common consolidated tax base, which would structurally end the shifting of profits of multinationals, blocked in Council. The transparency over the tax payments of multinationals, blocked in Council. And the digital tax, which would ensure fairness between local businesses and digital giants, blocked in Council. The German presidency, guess how many of these files were unblocked under the German presidency? What's your guess, Anna?
I don't know. I wish they could have made a difference, but probably zero.
Grand coalition. There's nothing grand about this. They've unblocked zero. Nothing. And what annoys me most is, I understand there's unanimity on tax matters. We have to overcome this, and we pushed the von der Leyen Commission to finally use Article 116 of the treaty to overcome the unanimity. But what annoys me most is, and that is the subject of our letter to the Portuguese presidency, that there's one proposal which can be voted with majority voting, and this is transparency on a country-by-country basis. Greens campaigned on it, Socialists campaigned on it. We have a big majority in the European Parliament, but still the European Council doesn't vote it. And now the Germans, one has to be honest, there was some hesitation also by the German Socialists, but they have changed. They have now in favor of it. But the Conservatives, our Christian Democrats, they are against. But now the Portuguese government, they have been in favor in the past. There were also some hesitations, but they are a progressive government. Now they should put it to the vote. So I thought, great, now we have a socialist presidency in the council, so we will have big advances for tax justice, as I know my colleagues in the parliament. But the reality is, if I see the first 6-pager on the presidency of Portugal, nothing on tax. And this is when I was really shocked, and I thought we need to create some publicity around this, because this is not in the interest of the majority of the people of Portugal, because it's well known that the larger multinational companies operating in Portugal, they very often pay their taxes on a very low rate in the beloved country of our Western neighbor, where Paul comes from. And he's, of course, known in the Netherlands of being a critic of these tax regimes. But Portugal would profit, as the majority of Europeans, from tax transparency. So please, when you use your campaign, do whatever you can that the new presidency is unblocking all these tax files and puts to a vote what can be voted in majority voting. And that is what our letter is about. You find it on my website. But I think that's a European matter. I have pushed the Germans as hard as I could. And now we are pushing, of course, the next presidency. So we shouldn't endeavor any nationalism here. It's a European interest.
Absolutely, Sven, and thank you for your initiative. And definitely, I believe that we need the concourse of everybody in the European Parliament, namely the Greens, but also in the Socialist and Democrats group, and Paul belongs to that group, and of course using his authority as chair of FISC to indeed press the Portuguese presidency to be sensitive and deliver in these matters. And actually, you rightly pointed out, Sven, it's quite disappointing that taxation matters are not in the agenda of the Portuguese presidency, despite some elements that were told to me that this would be the case. Nothing is there. But now Portugal is pressed, because it was only last Friday, that the European Commission took a very important decision to actually ask to conclude, following all the work we have done in the inquiry committees to which we belonged before in the European Parliament, that Madeira, in particular, is, of course, been a jurisdiction where the special tax system allowed by the Commission has been based on fraudulent information regarding economic activity, which is not generated in Madeira by the societies that are registered in the free zone of Madeira, and also the number of jobs, because these were the two conditions for the Commission to allow this special taxation free zone. Creation of jobs in Madeira and creation of economic activity that would generate profit in Madeira. All the figures the Commission concluded after 3 years of investigation were false. And the Commission, very wisely, in my opinion, does not put any punishment on Portugal, but actually asks Portugal and gives it 8 months to go and recover the money from these companies. And some of these companies are big companies like Sonangol, the oil company of Angola, or the oil company in Italy, or Pemex, the oil company in Mexico. These are well-known companies who have been given tax exemptions at the expense of the people of Madeira and of the people of Portugal. And the Commission now says, now Portugal, go and get the money back. And of course, this makes sense, as Paul was saying, in the time when our states are absolutely short of money to pay for the social measures that are so needed to face the pandemics, the social impact of the pandemics. It is outrageous not to go and recover the money. I'm afraid I just have been to Madeira this weekend by chance, and I've heard the local government of Madeira, who's been in power for 40 years, by the way, same party, refusing to accept the ruling and actually trying to press the Portuguese government to go to court against the Commission. That's insane, because of course then they risk having a severe punishment for Portugal, and of course it's wrong, because the right thing to do is what the Commission orders Portugal to do. But I can imagine that this will, as you see, Sven and Paul, this is going to be putting the question of tax justice in the agenda of this campaign for the presidency of Portugal. It's amazing, the current president has done nothing, and you know, he is a professor of constitutional law and a professor and an expert. He's been he was even the leader of the party that's been ruling Madeira for over 40 years. So yes, that matter is definitely going to be in our discussion, and this discussion we are having today is certainly very useful to make many citizens in Portugal understand what is at stake and how important is the work that you've been doing in the European Parliament. I was very honored to be part of that, and I will count very much on what you can do from that now on. So Madeira is very important, because, you know, if Madeira is a small jurisdiction. Paul has mentioned the countries that have been identified as tax havens in the EU, his own country, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Malta, Cyprus, Ireland. Netherlands is definitely the biggest problem for Portugal. Most of the Portuguese companies are headquartered formally in the Netherlands, fictionally in the Netherlands, to be able to shift profit and not to pay taxes in Portugal, and to actually not pay taxes on profits that they make elsewhere in the world. But the reason that really ties the hand of the Portuguese government, of any Portuguese government, even of a socialist government, is indeed, how can they fight against the other member states that function as tax havens for our economy, if at the same time they have a little tax haven that is Madeira? which is a center for money, could be a center for money laundering for all sorts of criminal activities, and definitely it is a center for what they call fiscal planning, tax planning. We know very well that's just an euphemism for tax evasion. So that is a crucial question, and definitely I could not be more supportive of your position that indeed we need the European presidency to move on CBCR, country by country reporting, which will enable indeed the transparency for what multinationals pay or don't pay. And the Portuguese presidency could make a difference and should make a difference at the same time as delivering on what the Commission requires it to do on Madeira. So I count on you as well in the European Parliament to indeed question the Portuguese authorities specifically on Madeira, because that's what will enable us to also be more consistent in fighting for tax justice and tax transparency at the European level. And definitely, as you say, we are definitely very much hurt. And another matter is definitely the digital tax. Well, FTT, the financial transaction tax. You know, Portugal was one of the countries to adhere to the initiative when Chancellor Merkel initially, a few years ago, launched that idea, which had been promoted by the socialists, by the way. Portugal adhered, but nothing happened. And as you said, it's been blocked. It's one of the things that are blocked in the Council. And the digital taxation is another matter. There is total opacity in Portugal about how much Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, or other big multinationals of the digital world pay or don't pay in taxes, here like in other European countries. So definitely we need movement on that. And I'd like to ask you, Paul and Sven, to tell us how, because often they use the argument, okay, this is something at the global level, and we need to work on this in the OECD framework, the BEPS initiative, and so on. But then, can we make the global stage move in this direction, even with the Biden presidency in the US, if Europe does not take the lead? Paul, and then Sven.
Not if Europe doesn't take the lead. That's crucially important. There are now negotiations in Paris ongoing under the umbrella of the OECD. That was initiated also before, but then at the start of that, it was impossible to discuss the taxation in the digitalized economy. The United States, and this was under the Obama administration, didn't want to discuss it. So there was an action point without any action on it. Then later, in the European Union came forward with the proposal of the digital service tax, which indeed is a sort of simple tax, but aimed at, well, Google and Facebook, you could say, on the sales of advertising and other turnover. This brought back the United States to the negotiation table. So it was under the Trump administration that the second round of negotiations began, because we forced the US back to the table. Because on the other side of the transatlantic, the idea was, Europe is serious in this taxation, and this is why we need the European pressure to on these negotiations to make this a success. So this is why we need a united position of Europe, and the Fiscal Committee will have a resolution also expressing that, a united position on a minimum effective tax rate and a form of digital tax. I try to keep it simple, so because that will keep the United States on the table. And now it's Biden, but we know that the Congress in the US will be have its own thoughts. So we need to have to put the pressure on. Now, this is true also for the national initiatives for a digital service tax, right? France introduced it, Czech introduced it, Italy, and this is enormously helpful. So don't think that because you're on your own, you can't achieve much. Well, it's better if you have a coalition, true, but you can start a coalition by making an initiative. And this is pushing, in fact, Europe to a united position and then pressuring the international negotiations. And the same is true for if we could form a coalition of countries that start to collect their taxes as we should collect taxes, why not? Let's make this coalition. This will change the world. So I don't think we should wait passively and then hope for an international agreement. Nothing at all. It requires European leadership. And if that's not, we will push for European leadership ourselves. That's what we have to do.
Sven.
Yeah, well, this is another German affair, one has to say, because if one sees the two things a bit separately. So on the one hand, there was the digital tax. This was strongly supported for many European countries, introduced even by some, led by France. Yeah, but we had in the Council a majority of all larger EU countries, including the UK. Even the Boris Poodle of the United States was in favor. So Poland was in favor, a country which is normally very close to the US for security reasons. Everybody was in favor. Italy was in favor, France, Spain, so all larger countries. I don't list you now all the smaller ones which were in favor. Basically, everyone was in favor except of Ireland, Luxembourg, Denmark, and Sweden. So a real coalition of superpowers. But then was Germany saying, no, if Luxembourg, Ireland, Sweden, and Denmark are against it, we can't do it. Yeah. It was really funny because you can introduce a digital tax unilaterally because you anchor the tax at the place of consumption. It wouldn't have mattered if Ireland taxes Irish using the digital industry. Everybody would have had additional income, at least 5 billion a year. So we lost already more than 10 billion by waiting to implement this proposal from the last commission in the last 2 years. Why was it not implemented? Yeah, because America was signaling very clearly that they don't like it. Yeah, and Germany said if America doesn't like it, it may endanger our exports to the US and it may trigger trade conflicts, so we can't do it. The funny thing about this is, at the same time, everyone in Europe, including us, calling for more European sovereignty, at least strategic sovereignty, taking our own decisions. And it's true, when Trump did his tax reform, it has cost us a lot of money because now multinational companies pay more taxes in the US and less elsewhere in the world. Guess whom he called and asked for permission? In Den Haag, in Lisbon, in Berlin? You are kidding, right? So he didn't ask anyone, he did it. And that is the difference. When Europe has a collective interest, we are asking for permission on the same subject area where Trump acts. And this, I feel, is also a question of self-confidence, whether you act or not. And Germany was refusing that self-confidence in such a critical moment. And this is still ongoing. Now we have a new situation. So Biden is in power when he ran on a program to restore a multilateral orientation on this. I was always in favor of going forward with the digital tax and minimum taxation in Europe, and then negotiate, as Paul said, with the Americans, a good transatlantic deal. Best would be to have a global deal. Now, with the change to Biden, I think it is good to give him a bit of time. Because I think if we now act unilaterally, we would only be the witnesses of those in the US who are saying, Biden, you will sell us to our international partners. You are naive when it comes to them. No, Biden deserves a chance to restore multilateralism in several dimensions. And after we wasted 2 years with Trump, we should give Biden half a year to come to terms on a global deal, which in the end would profit everyone in the world to have more fair taxation. That's my position. But of course, Biden has a bit dark spot. He comes from Delaware. So Delaware is the home of anonymous shell companies in the US. And this costs us a lot of money. In his tax program, unlike other Democratic candidates, he was very weak on shell companies. So we have to talk straight also with the new administration and don't have to believe that we will naturally get a good deal. We have to try to give him a chance, but in the end, we have to defend our tax base, also with Biden.
Time for FIS to consider starting talks with people like Elizabeth Warren. I remember last time we went there, she was definitely one of the most sympathetic to our points of view. And even in Delaware, they were changing some aspects of their legislation because it was so permissive in the incorporation system that would enable it to be in conduits for all sorts of criminality. But let me ask you, recently we had this report by Tax Justice Network showing that globally $427 billion is lost every year to tax havens. Don't you think? And of course, part of that is affecting European member states. Don't you think this could be used to, and I understand that OECD has backed this study by Tax Justice Network. Can you use this to actually press the Council to act in this respect, not just in the CBCR, but also on VAT? I mean, Paul, you said, or no, it was Sven who mentioned the 50 billion at least that are lost per year on VAT, and the Commission, I remember Moscovici as Commissioner, putting a finger on the fact that part of that money was lost to organized crime, including terrorist organizations such as Al-Qaeda and Daesh. It's incredible how our member states still block it in the Council when they are losing billions for criminal and terrorist activities. Can't we make a better job of making this security angle press the Council to unblock it? Paul and Sven, what do you think?
Well, I fully agree that at least the tax fraudish parts of this are clearly linked also to organized crime. We have seen it with the Cum-Ex scandal. We have seen it with the emission trading scandal. We are seeing it with VAT. And this is not only some individuals doing here and there some fraudulous bankruptcy of companies in order to steal VAT repayment, ex-ante payments. No, this is organized crime, and of course highlighting this is good. However, we have had a lot of facts, and it was not enough. And the real issue is such: in the European Union are some member states which are profiting net enormously from blocking progress in tax legislation. And then there are member states which are losing, like Portugal, and they are not daring to really call the subject a political conflict. So we have had in the last mandates these detailed studies on the so-called Code of Conduct Group on Business Taxation, which over 20 years basically achieved only limited progress, to put it friendly. And everywhere, always when there were really sensitive issues, it was blocked by some countries. But what I found the most amazing was not that they were blocking. This is not surprising. What was surprising is that the other member states have accepted the blockade. So the real question is, when are these issues getting really political? So look at Hungary and Poland, what a fuss they make of the rule of law issue. Well, their case is quite illegitimate, but the majority of member states has a very legitimate case to get tax justice in Europe done. But where is the European Council with night shifts discussing the matter? And I'm waiting for the progressive members of the European Council to really put this on the agenda and to say we don't accept that any longer. So blockades are de jure possible, but politically they are only possible in the long term if those whose money is stolen accept it. And so far it was accepted. And I hope that we can change with the permanent pressure of new information, our committee. So we must make this a true political conflict on the European stage.
Paul, I would only add, we have here a question by Cristina Costa. Maybe you can develop this also in view of her question is, what is the role of the pandemic's emergency in unblocking the blocking in the Council?
Yeah, and let me also relate that to the answer by Sven, which is excellent. The tax justice report raises awareness, and that is good, because more and more people see what is going on and how much money this costs and how unfair it is. So in that sense, you can see that the tax justice report is accepted widely. So that's also showing that awareness is growing. Now the question is, how do we get from awareness to action? And that's the point that Sven is addressing. And I see an excellent opportunity here, because we now spend European money in the form of loans and grants to support the member states, the recovery and the resilience fund and plans that come with that. And this is a good opportunity to tie this spending of European money to some of the conditions. And the Commission is trying to do that, and the Parliament will be very keen that the Commission does it. We will have a close monitoring, because now we're going to tie their actions against aggressive tax planning to the spending of money, and this is where we see the action coming. This is going to be crucially interesting, and this is where the Portuguese presidency can play a clear role. The plans have to be delivered in this period, and don't be shy to speak out against those member states. Take, for example, the Netherlands. We had a huge debate in the run-up to the council in June between, on the one hand, Italy, and the other hand, Netherlands. Right, Netherlands was leading the 4 frugal countries, but it's also the same country, the Netherlands, that costs the other European member state a lot of money. And this is what I try to explain in my home. I once estimated the Netherlands is a cost for the other European neighbors of about $14 billion a year. Mm-hmm. We need to connect it. And this brings me also to the question. I think that we are in a time, and maybe it's not the time right now in December 2020, where we're still discussing quick testing and vaccinations, but it will not take very long before we come to the point we need to balance the expenditure and revenue in the public sector. We need to discuss what is fair, who will be supported, who will be not. And I'm really confident that taxation will be high on the agenda for this time. And I'm also confident, and this time is different, I would say. I don't expect us to return to a policy of austerity and reforms. People are fed up with it, and if there is no social support in society for those kind of policies. So you have to turn to another policy. And one of those policies is fair taxation. There are many corporates, there are many very wealthy people. It's not even the 1%, sometimes it's the 1% of the 1%, and that don't pay their fair share. We have many polluters, as also among the corporates, who don't pay their fair share. So this is the agenda that I see coming, and it will come soon. At the moment, we discuss the recovery from the COVID crisis. So that is, and I very much hope that it's pretty soon, because I would like to see us in person as well, of course.
So this is linked as well with the payment of the money that the Commission is supposed to be getting from the market to pay for the recovery fund. And that's where indeed we need them to pay it via the pollution, the digital tax, but also the FTT. And I have here a question from Ana Gomes. How do you see indeed the FTT, the financial transactions tax, as part of a new own resources project in the European Union? Can you touch on that?
Well, yeah, sure. Well, as you perhaps know, I co-founded Attac Germany, which had, when we set it up in its name, the Tax Tobin, so which was the debate leading to a more encompassing financial transaction tax. And I have to say, this is really painful, because I remember well when we managed in the parliament to push, at the time, the Barroso Commission to propose a financial transaction tax for Europe. It was a big fight. You were there as well. You might remember how hard it was to get the majority. So we managed. And then what happened? So the council did, and they shrunk the project from a real financial transaction tax, also taxing derivatives, to now a project of 10 member states taxing stock equity only. So I call this not a financial transaction tax. And what is now on the table as an FTT is no FTT. We can also tax anything else, like purple scarves or something like that. Yeah, so it makes no sense to tax the turnover with equity. This is the part of the financial market actually we like most. I can only say this is a misuse of the name, and the real FTT on a broad tax base as a European own resource would be a great outcome. But what they are discussing at the moment has nothing to do with an FTT, and it is only a fake business. And therefore, I said this quite often already, that, and in Germany at least, the coalition, which has worked with hundreds of NGOs, trade unions, churches for the FTT, they have stopped the campaign in protest against this old, this new REST FTT, which is misusing their name. And yeah, so therefore, let's work for own resources. It's good that the plastic tax is coming. It's good that the ETS money is going into it. We have more ideas for sustainable tax bases, and a real FTT would also be a really good move. But this is not what's on the table at the moment, and let's not get confused only by a name from what's really taxed. So yeah, I had that debate with Mr. Scholz and Mr. Genti and Roberto Gualtieri, whom we also know well. Unfortunately, they want to keep this in the debate. I think it's a misuse of the name.
Okay, so you earlier said that fighting against tax evasion, and in that context, do you think it's more a priority to bring back the question of tax competition? And you, Paul, you campaigned a lot for a EU-wide minimum effective tax rate. Of course, this flies into the face of those who want to keep what they say tax sovereignty, although they don't have any tax sovereignty at all. How do you see this going? Is this high in the agenda now of FISC?
Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. Yeah, that's the good thing, that with the discussion in Paris and in the OECD, we are now having a discussion on the minimum effective tax rate. You could argue, like some on the right-hand side of the political spectrum do, that that it is not in line with sovereignty, but I always find the concept of sovereignty very difficult. If it just means just lowering your corporate tax rate, if that's sovereignty, then it's still sovereignty. But I always assume sovereignty, it would have a choice at the national level. And what we have seen in many years, I can really find an example of a country that has raised the corporate tax rates in the last 20 years. So the sovereignty is out of the window. So what you need is to turn the race of the bottom around, and that is why you need this coalition of countries. And it's under discussion at the OECD, but I would very much like to see that we also form a European coalition and take this idea that we raise the minimum, because the point also, and some like to confuse it, but the point is, and I think the example of Madeira shows that, it's most of the constructions that we're dealing with are paperwork. It's paperwork. The IMF calls them, Sven just mentioned the word shell companies. The IMF calls it phantom investments. So these are the constructions, and they reroute. So if you look, for example, at the investment statistics, they are astonishing. So you see that countries like Luxembourg and the Netherlands attract more investment than the United States or China. So these are the world economic powers, and these small countries in Europe, they attract more investment than the US or China. It just shows what a massive industry this has become. And this is what you need to fight. So when we're saying, does it impose on sovereignty? No, I would say it brings back your sovereignty, brings back the choice of the member states to do, because in the end you're fighting exact this type of constructions. And it's not just that we need to have a lower bound in the European tax system, it's also in the relation to other countries that we need that. So capital is really without any border. It can flow anywhere. We have to show our passport. Capital does not, and this is what it's extremely beneficial, because this allows all this kind of construction. So you need some form of minimum tax rate also to make sure that you establish a border. That if capital flows to, let's say, the Bahamas or the Bermudas, it only is allowed to go there if taxes are being paid. So there needs some form of border control.
Sven, it was Moscovici who used to call the CCCTB, the Consolidated Common Corporate Tax Base, the mother of all solutions against tax avoidance and to prevent harmful tax competition and practices in the EU. Are we moving on that direction? Is it in the agenda of the Parliament, the Commission, and the Council?
No, because Paul, we have to make it a bit entertaining, otherwise it's getting boring. Yeah. So, so the Parliament has voted its opinion a long time ago. So the Parliament has already decided the proposal. The Council is blocking it because everybody is waiting for the global deal at the OECD. is a much softer version because it is a sort of minimum taxation regime, but at least with an effective tax rate. And while we had in Europe always the following absurd situation, the Christian Democrats and liberals were in favor of common consolidated tax base, but not of a minimum tax rate. This would have led to a race to the bottom accelerated because we have then a common tax base, and so that the real tax rates become much more comparable. So we would certainly have, without a minimum tax rate regime in Europe, even stronger competition for the rates when you can't compete on the base anymore. So we would have seen a movement to what I call, ironically, transparent non-taxation. So of corporate profits. So therefore, it's very good that the OECD is now working on effective minimum tax rates and taxation, but that doesn't close the matter, because when you only have some global rules, it is still very complex to divide the cake. So Europe would reduce tax avoidance mechanisms and lower bureaucracy for all cross-border companies by moving to a real consolidated common corporate tax base. But now I have to be a bit picky, because even some of the more progressive members of the finance ministries in Europe, so like Olaf Scholz, he doesn't support the consolidation. He wants a common tax base, but no consolidation. Without the consolidation, all the haggling between national tax authorities continues. If you don't consolidate, but only make common rules, you basically keep the bureaucracy while having more common rules, which I don't understand why this is progressive. It's also not business friendly. It makes no sense. So it's only because they are scared that the consolidation could move a bit more tax base from Germany to countries which are less export oriented. And I think that is against European solidarity. Yes. Germany would certainly be profiting from more global tax cooperation, but it would also suffer a bit by having countries which are not as strong in exporting as Germany, having a bit bigger part of the cake. And I think someone who receives by cooperation should also be generous enough to share a bit. And therefore, I agree, stay on the table. First, OECD has to, it's good that they are moving on this, but being against the consolidation, I think, is really a mistake. And we should join alliances also with the business side to get also the consolidation.
Shouldn't we then make more the case for the violation of the competition rules in the internal market that comes from all this tax dumping system that has been allowed in this way? The fact that you have small and medium companies paying 30% more tax than big companies, big corporations, according to the Commission figures.
Sure.
Isn't that the challenge for us, to make the case to the citizens so that they press governments to move ahead?
The argument we are making since a long time, and I saw in this debate in the last 20 years a huge shift. Because when we started talking corporate tax, the whole business community was saying tax competition is a good thing because it brings effective tax rates down. This has changed in more and more sectors. For instance, in retail, there's now a solid majority of the companies and their lobbies in favor of common rules, because they know exactly that they will lose out against the Amazons and others. And therefore, some regulation is actually good for business because it ensures fair competition. And that is an argument we can make, and we have already interesting allies in the business sector in this regard.
Paul, would you like to add something?
Yeah, on this point of that it's possible to make an alliance. Coming back to one of the topics we discussed before, country by country reporting. There are some good examples nowadays of corporates already applying this principle of country by country reporting, including Vodafone. And one of my enemies from all the days, Shell, the oil company, is now applying country by country reporting. I always challenged Shell that they didn't pay taxes in the Netherlands, so they didn't want to tell, but now they admitted they don't pay taxes. They have moved to country by country reporting. There you see, it's also an interest for many of the companies. When I was working on the corporate tax system, I could easily have an alliance of NGOs on the one hand and big corporates on the other hand, because the big corporates are not necessarily concerned that they pay taxes as long as every of their competitors pay taxes. And this brings you back to the idea of competition law. I think that's a strong prerogative of the Commission, and Vestager has really tried, of course, by bringing Apple forward. Of course, this was lost for the European Court. If you would, by the way, if you would go to Ireland, and I did go to Ireland, people were very much, well, Apple owes us $6 billion. Please have it, right? But there you see a huge discrepancy between the Irish politics and the Irish public, I think. The Irish politics defends the measure, a bit like the Madeira government defends the free trade zone. But the public in general has a very different perception. But okay, Vestager lost the case. Still, I think it's very good that she brought these cases to the court, because it raises a lot of awareness, right? Oh, this is what is going on. So, and from awareness eventually follows action. And like I said, I'm optimistic on this period. I think we will see huge changes coming in the years to come, because we don't want to go back to the policy of austerity. We want to have fair taxation as funding our recovery plans.
Yeah.
Vestager has lost in first instance. My understanding is she's challenging it, but one has to say competition law cannot fix the tax competition problem, because competition law has to prove specific cases. And if you move to transparent non-taxation, there's nothing in EU competition law which can stop this. And this is what we are seeing. More and more tax havens in the world are simply not taxing corporate income. And this is fully legal under European law, as long as you treat all companies equal. And even in the EU, we have the case of Estonia, which doesn't tax earned corporate profits. This model proliferates. There's nothing in EU competition rules to do about it. We have very generous patent boxes, which are given to all companies. The Netherlands have a really nasty version of this, if I may say this, Paul, which is costing us a lot of money. And this is, if you give the same sort of treatment to all companies, you are allowed to do it, generally rule. And therefore, competition law was good in order to end certain extreme cases, but we have to do the job ourselves as lawmakers, council and parliament, to fix the problem.
And can I also add to this why the debate will change? One of the companies that uses the patent box in the Netherlands is Booking.com. They reroute their profits away from mainly, let's say, the big countries with a high tax rates, let's say France and Germany, and they route the profits to the Netherlands, and there they benefit from the patent box, saying they have done a lot of innovations, and which allow them to pay little taxes in the Netherlands. The interesting part is that one of the first when the first support program for corporates appeared in the Netherlands, Booking applied, and my country sort of exploded. What, you guys that use the Dutch taxes and misuse our tax system. You can apply for support, for public support. Okay, they didn't do it the second time, and this is why I think the dynamic at this point is really interesting. So much of the corporates are now depending on public support. They know that we expect something in return. Let that one thing also be that they pay their fair share of taxes. And this is why I'm extremely optimistic on this time. We can win this debate in this way.
Yeah, and so we need to know how to make them understand that they will pay a reputational price for not moving in the right direction. Yeah. Let me now turn to the other angle in which we work a lot and which is linked, which is the revision of the European anti-money laundering framework. We saw that we needed a more comprehensive and enforceable framework. Are we closer to a regulation instead of these directives that each member state decides how to transpose and often don't work? And are we close to creating a European FIU, a European Investigative Financial Unit that is so crucial for indeed we do not continue allowing our financial system to be a conduit for money laundering and financing of terrorism and other criminal activities, and to actually be more, to make more accountable these professional sectors that now misuse, for instance, professional secrecy, like the lawyers, accountants, and other operators, and that play a crucial role in engineering this tax evasion schemes and these money laundering schemes. This is very crucial in a country like Portugal, but as we've seen, in inquiry committees, it's everywhere. So where are we in this respect? Sven, can you?
Well, look, the regulation will come. I remember well sitting with you during the night negotiating the last reforms of AMLD, so the Anti-Money Laundering Directive. And the new version will come, and there will also be a regulation. The Council has moved tremendously. After you remember how strongly they fought against the transparency of beneficial ownership in companies, they have now voted a standpoint on the future reform, and reform is in comparison what we got at the time progressive. But there's one major sticking point one has to say. So first, how much will be put in the regulation and what will stay in the directive? There we will have a long battle with them. But I think we have some chances because this is majority voting, and the reputational damage for Europe with all these money laundering scandals has become really big. So there has to happen something. The European supervisor will certainly come for the larger financial actors, but the FIU, which you were mentioning, whether there will be a true European investigative body, this is very much uncertain because the Council calls this only a coordination and support mechanism while respecting the current order of competences. So they don't want a European unit. The Commission is unclear. The Parliament has said we want a European FIU, but I would say the Christian Democrats were much more careful. So this will become a big struggle, and equally unclear is whether we will get a European financial police, because it's not enough to have an investigative body searching through dirty money flows, which is good. We also need mechanisms to chase the criminals. And Europol has made some moves, but they have very little resources. Europol has less than 5% of the budget of the US FBI. And this is what we need if we have global criminals. We need European law enforcement bodies. And this debate, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, but this is all not yet done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember how Europol was one of the strongest advocates that indeed we need a European financial investigative unit with real investigative powers. Otherwise, we're not enabling indeed those who are supposed to at the national level and at the European level really fight organized crime, including the financing of terrorism. And that's one point that I always was trying to make, was to bring, because, you know, whenever there is a terrorist attack, our member states all want to show to our people that they want to do things, that they are strong. But actually, as we have demonstrated and as we have seen, they are very, very lax on the financing of organized crime, including terrorism. And that's something that we need to bring more to our citizens to make our member states move in the right direction. Otherwise, we'll continue to see our own jurisdictions being not just places for tax evasion, but being places for money laundering for organized crime, including the financing of terrorism. And I see that at least some movement has been made on one of the systems that actually enables that perversely, which is the so-called golden visa system. I mean, Portugal is one of these countries. Those who are on the first line of that perverse industry, Malta and Cyprus, have already been, are now already under infringement procedures by the European Commission, because of course they sell directly golden passports. In Portugal, in a way, they sell it by installments after 5 years. And the system is quite perverse, because it's not just the people who get the golden passports, but also their relatives who come, and no control whatsoever. You know, this is ideal. In Portugal, it's ideal for Chinese triads to infiltrate their people in the Schengen zone, and then of course operate after a few years of sleeping quietly inside the EU. So where do you see this going? Is the Commission really turning serious on this? Paul?
Like you said, it's we see infringement procedures, and I think you always dived into this topic, and you're very right to say you know it better than I do, I suppose. But we see infringement procedures that are very welcome. Indeed, Cyprus and Malta. At one point, having a Maltese was almost like someone said it. You have a yacht, 2 airplanes, and the next thing to get is a Maltese passport. It's a quote. It's a status symbol at one point. To get that, and not from the people that we really want in Europe. So yes, I think the Commission has always tried to tackle these issues, but also encountered pretty much resistance. The infringement procedures help, but of course what we need is minimum requirements for citizenships and for residency, so that we can and to get to that would be it's a longer way. But generally speaking, I would say that we need that, but it's very much linked to the earlier topic we had. When I look in the Netherlands, much of the industry that works for tax avoidance and for tax evasion is also very much used for money laundering and possibly also will terrorist finance. So that it's this conglomerate of activities that sort of enable this. And I somehow hope that once we are able to put stricter rules on, let's say, the intermediates, the lawyers, the tax advisors, that will certainly help a lot. So I push for making for these professions a protected profession, so that you have quality standards that they need to apply to, because this is the problem. This is why we need transparency as one of the. There are always clever boys and girls trying to find ways and to around, and the best thing we can do is to make it as transparent as possible. But this is a fight also because, like you said, you've been very passionate about this, Anna, and this is exactly the passion that we need, because member states do not always live up to it. One of my frustrations is not always in, let's say, the regulation that Sven just discussed, what we need to do is not just the regulation, it's also the implementation of that, of the legislation. If I look at the FIUs, they are completely understaffed. And I think, oh, okay, and we're as strong as the weakest link in this respect. And this is why we need to have to put the pressure on and have these examples to show the public the relevance, and from there raise again the political pressure for change.
Sven, would you like to add something?
Yeah, well, I can't agree more. I have a now 2-year-long process with the Commission to get them to open infringement proceedings against Germany because of the totally dysfunctional FIU. So the funny thing about this is the coalition had to report again and again to the German Bundestag, so the German parliament, that the German FIU is not up to standard. That is again the AMLD 3, so which is in power since 2007. Others FIU may have the same problem, but the German one I understand best. But the Commission is not opening the infringement proceeding. And they have not opened a single infringement proceeding because of bad implementation. They have opened infringement proceedings because of incorrect transposition of the law, but not because of bad implementation. And we know that anti-money laundering rules are badly implemented. And so I fully agree. When it comes to the golden visa and golden passports, it's also hard to understand. So first, I remember well, Anna, when you were still with us, we were already pushing very strongly on EU Commission to act against passports, golden passports and visa. Now, because of the revelation of Qatar-based Al Jazeera, it's also a bit funny, huh? In Cyprus, they have opened infringement proceedings for selling citizenships, but not visa. And we know what and why. Countries like Portugal, Spain, Greece are selling visa on massive scale. I know that you have always criticized this business in Portugal. And after 5 years, you can move to get a citizenship. So I wrote another nasty letter to Madame von der Leyen and asked her, what is this? Why do you chase the small Cyprus and Malta programs? But when it comes to larger programs, which are selling visa, which is also a civil right, you don't do anything. And that is basically not correct. And I think we have to put this issue out because I think we should treat everybody equal. I know that your colleague Alfred Sand, he always freezes if he sees me, so he doesn't say hello and so on.
Don't worry, stay with me.
He comes from Malta, he's a socialist from Malta. So always when he sees me in the parliament, it is as if the devil is coming close to him. And but you are not there anymore But however, everybody should be treated. I don't like the Maltese program, but it's not fair to act against the two smallest countries and being doing nothing when it's about the bigger programs, which are very similar. So everybody treats their fair share of criticism, and I always start with my own country. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, in the case of Portugal, we did not invent the wheel back in 2012 under the Troika. We actually copied with what was done in other European countries. And what was clear to me already in the beginning, and that's why I was trying to monitor what was going on in Portugal. And it was until today, the Portuguese authorities never gave me the list of the people who got the golden visas, because I know that I would find a lot of crooks. It's the only explanation. And what I feared from the beginning is that this would lower the ethical level of our border police, because it's our border police who is in charge of actually analyzing the processes and granting the golden visas. And, you know, we have this year an horrendous event, horrendous crime in our Lisbon airport at the hands of some border police officers, an Ukrainian visitor, probably someone looking for work in Portugal, was murdered, was tortured and assassinated in our airport by 3 elements of the border police. And then 12 other people covered up at the highest level that when there was reporting because of a doctor who reported it honestly, then there was an investigation. Now it is established that 12 people within the border police covered up that horrendous act of murder. And I can't imagine that this would have occurred in our police if indeed the standards, the ethical standards, wouldn't have been so dramatically lowered by the fact that, you know, there they are, the same border of police who deals with poor migrants and who puts all sorts of objections, then has this golden channel for people able to pay. And of course, you can imagine that it's very easy for any crook or kleptocrat from all over the world to produce a clean bill of criminal health, which is totally fictitious. And it's really a really serious problem. Until this day, in fact, this has not been dealt with. And I'm very sorry to say that even the socialist government has not changed what has happened, what this framework. On the contrary, it has even lowered the threshold for payment for this program. So it's very, very, very much concerning, and definitely that's one of the issues that keeps me pushing. Together with all the issues we've been discussing today. Thank you, Paul and Sven. I would like to give you the opportunity to give some final comments. We have other questions, but I think we dealt with by our viewers, but I think we dealt already with those questions regarding the FTT and regarding the digital taxation. And there were even some questions about golden visas. Would you like, let me just thank you for this great opportunity to have this discussion for viewers all over Europe and the world and here in Portugal. I think it's quite important for people to see that the European Parliament really has people who work hard, who understand what is at stake, who see ahead. And I can tell you that as for my part, definitely as already a candidate for the presidency of the Republic, I'll be putting this in the national agenda. I'll be putting pressure in the Portuguese presidency. I'll be putting pressure in the Portuguese other bodies, including the President of the Republic, to deal with these crucial questions of fairness, of justice. Tax justice in the EU is crucial for justice in the EU and justice in Portugal. So, Paul, would you like to say?
Well, just thank you for this meeting. And it's exactly this drive that you have and your, let's say, your feeling for justice that drives you, that I so much miss. And in that sense, I'm very jealous of Portugal that they can vote for you as president. I would, of course, and that's why I miss you. And just also for the viewers, one of the first time I met Ana, she came up to me and she said, do you know that all firms except one that are listed on the stock exchange also have a subsidiary in the Netherlands, that they also have a location? And I tell this story because I tell this many times to my compatriots, right? How do the people outside the Netherlands look at the Netherlands? This is one of the examples that I give. This is what people think about. All the Portuguese firms having a location, a subsidiary in the Netherlands. But I love this, the drive which you do that, and I wish you the best of luck. And it was a real pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you, Paul, as well, for the great work you've been doing, actually, on making the Netherlands aware of the role that is being played. It's really amazing, the work you've been doing.
Thank you.
And Sven, now you
Well, look,
close our debate
I don't have such a nice story to share, but to me, I think there are some bad profiteers from you not being in the parliament anymore. In particular, in Malta, they never missed us, so we can't go there anymore together so easily. But however, the work is taken forward, and I can only pity your adversity.
But Sven, how amazing the events in Malta confirming all we suspected and told. We will from the beginning.
It is true, and we stayed longer in politics than Muscat, so this was good. Unfortunately, Mr. Timmermans, who refused us ever to see us together again, he's still in office, but he's not blocking this anymore. So the men's group in the commission which protected Muscat is gone, and von der Leyen has opened now at least some action, which is good. And however, so I pity your adversaries. I'm sure you will put, as Paul put it rightly, your sense of justice in the campaign, and you have a really strong story to tell. And I think in the end, transparency and clean business is profiting everyone, at least except of course of the criminals. And I wish you well, and we are taking your work forward in the parliament.
And we'll keep working together. Absolutely.
Of course we do. And I have to say also Pedro Marques, who is now the socialist coordinator in the FISC, we work very well with him. And of course, that's fine. And we have problems with other groups. I put it like this.
Yeah, that's how it works.
I'm sure you will work well with Pedro. I'm putting also my hopes in his work. Thank you all. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sven.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
This discussion with you. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you.
Bye-bye.